how about if somebody wrote a book called Destroy the World's Influence in Your Kid's Life?
Wow. Boy.
The One Rule Home. Jeff, good morning. Welcome to Good Morning Ozarks.
Hi, Jeff.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
Now, since my co-host is blind and can't read your book cover, I'm going to ask him to ask you how to pronounce your last name, Keith.
All right, Jeff, how do you pronounce your last name, which I don't even know how to spell it because I haven't seen it.
It's very politically correct. It sounds like shot, like a gunshot.
What?
Jeff Schadt?
Yeah.
Well, Keith, let me tell you, after my football announcing years, I'd have never got that one.
How do you spell it?
S-C-H-A-D-T.
Shot. Huh. I would have missed that one, too.
Me too. So give us the history behind that.
Yeah. What's your family name?
Well,
Where does it come from?
It's German/Swedish, and tons of them in the cemeteries back there. But yeah, that's where it generates from.
So was this the shot that was
Heard
around the world?
around the world.
Whoa.
Well, some people feel that way about my book at times.
Jeff, before we talk about the book, I want to find out a little bit about you, where you're born and grew up. Give us a little bit of your faith journey as well.
Yeah, well, was born in Illinois, but grew up moving around the country because my dad was an executive with Pepsi, moving up the ladder to be vice president at world headquarters. So got to see a lot of the country and experience a lot of things. Grew up in the Lutheran church and was confirmed, but really decided to make the Lord my own in college my freshman year, and that moved me right into, by the end of my time with college, I went on staff with one of the college ministries and served for 4.5 years there, and then that just kind of continued from there to bring me to do what I'm doing now.
Would that have been Cru, Campus Crusade for Christ? Which one?
Yeah, yep, that was actually Cru.
Yeah. Well, it's not Cru. It's Campus Crusade for Christ. If you want to call it Cru, you can. I can't get it out of my mind.
You
okay?
can't make the change, right?
There is a huge influence in Branson, Missouri with Cru. They've been coming here for at least 33 years that I know of and longer. Tell him what they do in the summer here, Keith.
Well, they come in here and they get involved in the community and some ministries in our area.
He didn't go very far with that.
I didn't go deep enough, sorry.
Because they get involved in businesses where they work. McDonald's and Wendy's and Chick-fil-A and all kinds of businesses like that, and then have their ministry things for them in the evening.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now it's called Summer Projects.
That's
we do
it.
them all over the country.
Well, we've got some summer projects for them here. You mentioned Illinois, and I know my co-host is dying to ask you, where in Illinois?
I was actually born in Evanston, Illinois.
Well, you were born in Kentucky. Oh, Evanston, not Evansville. Evanston.
No,
You're got Northwestern stamped on you.
Yeah, my dad went there.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, he's a bright fella because Northwestern, I found out something over the weekend, it's the only private school in the Big Ten.
Really? I did not know that.
Did not know that either.
No.
How long did you live in Illinois before you moved?
I lived there 3 different times, but the first time only 2 years.
And
Wow.
then how old were you when you went back?
I was back there for middle school, the middle school years in Palatine, Illinois.
Sure, very, very close. We spent years in Naperville, so we know that shore up the right side of Lakeshore Drive, moving its way up to Evanston. Well, let's dive into the book because, first of all, I want to find out the One Rule Home. What's that mean?
It's based upon research with 3,000 kids that I did, and basically I ended up taking that research and looking at the Bible and having to really wrestle because I've got a seminary degree and I learned more from listening to the kids and wrestling with the Bible than I did from seminary. And what I realized was we have this long list of expectations for our kids. And so in this process of doing the research, I went and looked at what was Jesus' expectation of the disciples. And after I really studied and had to dig and wrestle hard with lots of passages, it came down to one. And it was in his last teaching time where he says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands, plural. If you do that, you'll remain in my love like I remained in my Father's love. And then later in the passage, he goes singular and says, this is my one command, love one another. This is true love, one who will lay down his life for a friend. And then later in the passage, he repeats it again so we don't miss it. This is my one rule, my one command. love one another. Of course, when I first came to that conclusion, I'm like, that's way too simple. I'm a dad with a daughter that's going off the rails. That will never work. But it led to a 9-month study where I realized, wow, love has so many more dimensions than I ever understood. And they're very practical. And that's the genesis of this book, is all the research and what was going wrong with my kids. And then how did we end up fixing that situation? And it was becoming Jesus to my kids as opposed to becoming more like the world to my kids. And fundamentally, that's the basis of the book.
Jeff, let's just dive in from a teenager perspective. Are you talking the 13-ish, the 17 to 18 in the middle, or all from the tweeners to the 18 or 19-year-old?
Well, the research I did was all with teenagers, but what was interesting is God kept providing me kids, and the last one was a shocking trailer 5 years after the other three, and was not planned at all. And it's like, wow. I remember when my wife rolled over and said, I think I'm pregnant. I'm like, you can't be. She goes, but I think I am. And
yeah. You know, believe me, we had that in our home too. Yeah, and it's a surprise. No, you got. I think it's something like this, right? You got to be kidding me. No,
exactly.
No, I'm not kidding you.
We were in shock up to the day that he was born. You know,
we're still in shock, and he's 42 years old.
How much time between that last one and the one just ahead of it?
5 years.
Okay.
So yeah, it was. We were 43 when the last Eric was born. But what was so amazing about this was I had been gradually by starting with our oldest kid, making changes. I'd gradually been kind of experimenting younger and younger. And when this one came along, I'm like, okay, let's just try it from day one with a kid straight out of the womb. And it produced the most amazing kid. All my other kids will say he's the best of us too. That has positive core beliefs instead of negative core beliefs. And so what we found was these parenting principles can work all the way down to the beginning. It sounds crazy, but and I'm going to say this, and everybody's going to want to turn off the radios. I hope to listen further. But Eric, my youngest, is the only one that's never received a consequence in terms of a punishment. Has he had natural consequences that were implied by teachers or other people, but he's never incurred what I'd call an inflicted consequence in his life. And everybody thinks your kid's going to end up completely spoiled and completely off the rails if that's the case, but not if you teach them to love and the different dimensions of love.
Well, and they've got to see it in mom. They got to see it in mom and dad. I cannot say that about our third child, that he didn't have some consequences, and the consequences probably were brought on because of my inabilities and my immaturity that I had to learn. My wife tried to help me raise our kids to focus on the family, and it was a big, big help. But I don't understand some things that you're going to have to help us with. I'm looking at the book. The book says, Keith, destroy the world's influence in your kid's life. Mm-hmm. Now, you talk about influencers. We talk about TikTok and YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, on and on and on and on and on. How do we do this in the midst of these influences?
That's the really cool thing of what we discovered in the research is every kid we talked to wanted to please their parents and wanted to succeed. And that was really a mind changer for me because I think as a parent with my oldest, who was very, very defensive and would blame the sun, the dog, the wind, the moon, anything could not be wrong, it seemed like the world had way more power in her life than me. But as I got into the research and heard it over and over again and then dug into what they meant, what they were saying is I used to feel close to my parents when I was young and when I seemed to be able to meet all their expectations. But as I got older, things changed. And they seemed disappointed with me all the time. They seemed frustrated or upset. I could never seem to measure up to what they wanted. And so I pulled away. I felt emotionally hurt, so I distanced. I started to hide in my room. And then once I was in my room, I I was bored out of my gourd. The kids can't just go ride around town by themselves anymore because we're so afraid, like I did growing up in Palatine, Illinois. I could ride across Palatine to the mall by myself, and or with a friend, and they don't have that freedom anymore. So they get trapped in their rooms, hiding from us because they're feeling like they can't please us, like we're unhappy with them most of the time. And then they're bored. And then they're like, so then, I got into the video games, and then that became a battle with my parents too. And it's like, I have no clue how to fix this situation. I want to be close to them, but they're making it impossible for me, was what I heard from kids over and over again. So when we, in the research, what was fascinating is I do these videotaped interviews with kids of an hour long. I started taking them back and showing them to my kids and going, do you see me the way these kids see their parents? And my kids were basically like, heck yeah, Dad. And the Holy Spirit slapped me in the face, and I realized I looked nothing like Jesus to my own kids. And then we're telling them to follow Jesus, and then they don't. And we're like, well, it's the world's fault. Well, is it? The cool thing is, if the world's really got more influence than us, give up. Throw in the towel. It's going to win. It's got way more entertaining, way more different facets, way more, temptation going on than I could ever deliver as a parent. But if God granted us the influence in our kids' lives from birth, and we're unwittingly frittering it away by not living and looking and approaching things like Jesus, that gave me a ton of hope as a parent, because if it's really up to me whether I lose my kids or not, great. Then, let's hit the rubber where it meets the road, and let's realize I don't look anything like Jesus to my kids.
Jeff Schadt is our guest this morning. He's the author of the book, Destroy the World's Influences to Your Kid's Life, The One Rule Home. Well, you've touched on something. We better just go back up a minute. You know why the kids are not agreeing with the parents, right, Keith?
Yeah.
Because they don't have our political view.
That's right.
They don't have our social view.
That's right.
They don't have our view. What do you mean, change? Come on. I want you to conform. You want to talk about that?
Do it just like we did it.
Come on, Jeff. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things that's biting us is my kids do have my political views still. But it's because of the way I led, because I led like Jesus. And it's because of the way I didn't fear the world, but I used the world to disciple my kids, as opposed to try and prevent them or control them from being influenced by the world. It's that prevention, that control. There was this national study done by Penn State, I believe, that studied love and what causes Americans to feel loved and unloved. And the number one thing that caused Americans to feel unloved was control. And yet, when we're afraid of the world, fear moves us towards protection, and protection moves us towards control. Jesus did the opposite. He took the disciples out of the temple and into the streets, to the party, the wedding, made wine. He took them around the sinners, the woman at the well, and they didn't fall because they saw the world and they were discipled in the world. And as I did that with my kids, they saw the benefits of leading a godly life, just like the disciples did, because they were in this environment of unconditional love that Jesus provided the disciples, that I was convicted I needed to provide for my kids. And so the cool thing about all of this is Jesus, the way he led, everyone chose to follow him. They didn't have to or else. 5,000 chased him around the lake when he was trying to get away. Today I see 5,000 kids running the opposite direction from their parents around the lake, right? And so when I began to change and lead like Jesus, my kids decided they wanted to follow me, and they said, Dad, you treat me better than the world. You treat me better than the friends. You treat me better than the teachers. I buy you and the way you love and lead way more than the world, my friends, and everything else. And then I didn't have to fear the world at all anymore, because they're like, I buy you, Dad. I don't buy the rest of this stuff. Well, and that's the magic of how Jesus led.
Well, that is an oil that some parent wants in their vase today, is what you just said. Now, I want you to do me a favor. In my hand, I have a pre-released copy, thanks to Don Otis and others. It's a good-looking book, Keith. By the way, let me hand it to you so you can feel it.
Oh, yeah.
And take a look at the cover. I want to explain that cover to you.
Very good.
Okay?
Cool.
And it's got slick print on it, buddy.
Yeah,
and it
nice.
says, destroy the world's influence in your kid's life.